Welcome to the 16th Arne Næss Symposium on Global Justice and the Environment, and the ecologically inspired tunes you've just heard are the signature of our event, and they've been composed especially for the Arne Næss Symposium by Lasse Thoresen, who is the leading Norwegian composer and played with the usual brio, mastery, and energy by Maiken, Mathisen, and Schau. So they deserve another round of applause. Thank you. And now I'd like to ask all absent-minded people to please control your iPhones, whether they are turned off or not. And if they are turned off, then I can let our wonderful rector, who is the patron of our symposium, Svein, to take the floor and to say a few words to open our proceedings. This is the usual custom, the ritual. And even if he has 10,000 other appointments and commitments to do, he comes here and he does the work of the rector. Thank you. Svein, please.
So, dear David, Nina, colleagues and friends, it's a great pleasure to be here, of course, always. And it's a great pleasure to welcome you to the Arne Næss Symposium of 2024. Special warm welcome to you, David Van Reybrouck, this year's Arne Næss Professor. Van Reybrouck is a cultural historian, archaeologist, and the architect of democratic innovations designed to combat the climate crisis. His work has been translated into over 20 languages, and you have won numerous prizes. David, we are delighted to have you here. The Arne Næss Professors are, as the audience would know, leading international scholars working on the interconnected questions of global justice, climate change, and the environment. They are invited to the University of Oslo to engage with students and inspire and discuss solutions to the climate crisis in the spirit of Arne Næss philosophy. As such, David, your advocacy for sustainable modernity, a project of renewing democracy while combating climate change, very much fits the bill. You have studied democratic experiments around the globe. You have set up the G1000 Citizen Summit, a platform for democratic innovation in your native Belgium. And this is important, of course. So there all, most of us feel that the global response to the climate crisis is way too slow. This current state of affairs led some to blame democracy as itself. And it might be tempting to look for more authoritarian regimes which are able to implement environmental policies without going through painstaking, time-consuming democratic processes. However, rather than calling for less democracy, we maybe need the opposite, to renew and strengthen it in the face of the climate crisis. Democratic elected governments are under threat globally, both from populists and from multinational companies outgrowing nation states. We need to protect the representative democracy, and we need to strengthen it. And the question is, of course, how? Democracy dies in darkness was the Washington Post famous slogan, 2017, I think. And I believe this is true. I'm convinced that events like this, where we share knowledge, ideas, opinions, is the best way forward to find new solutions. By shining a light on democracy from every possible angle, we can help also to strengthen democracy. And today's topic, how democratic innovation is the best tool to combat global warming, is very much in the spirit. Arne Næss' relentless advocacy for social reforms to promote human and environmental justice has influenced generations, both at the University of Oslo and our society of him greatly. While standing on his shoulders, we need to look ahead for fresh and perhaps even disruptive ideas on how to do this. And this is exactly the purpose when the University of Oslo now try to implement an ambitious plan for a new Center for Global Sustainability. The center will, to a large degree, build on the experiences and the result for many years of teaching and research in the Center for Development and the Environment. And it will strengthen our efforts in this field even more. By bringing together scientists, sustainability researchers from across the university under one roof, we aim to challenge our disciplines, and we aim to challenge our minds. As well, of course, to attract students hungry for knowledge, hungry for change. This is, of course, not happening in isolation. We will need to do this in close collaboration with the international research community and also with the rest of the society around the university. Arne Næss left behind a rich philosophical heritage with sustainability, solidarity, and equality at its core. It seems even clear today that one cannot be achieved without the other. And a discussion about democratic innovation is a very good place to start. I wish you the best of luck with an interesting and important seminar here today. So thank you so much, and again, welcome to David.
Thank you very much, Svein, for these very uplifting and wise words, which we need all the time. And I just wanted to say, to note that this Arne Næss Symposium is out of the ordinary for several reasons. First of all, as far as I guess, there's not just one Arne Næss Professor sitting in the audience here, David Van Reybrouck, but also the other two from 2010 and 2020. Joly, definitely, 2020 Arne Næss Professor. Where is Robin Eckersley? Is she here? She's not? Oh, she's there. Wonderful. 3 Arne Næss Professor. A big applause. This is the first historical... I thought that you will talk later and disagree on everything. There is a tremendous amount of brain energy here in this auditorium, and I think that it's thanks to the fact that all 3 Arne Næss Professors have been specializing in running the work that runs counter to the Ragnarokian scenarios or trends that predict that the planet, the humanity, democracy is kaput, or that they are going to hell, right? They are trying to look for solutions, and that's what they share, all 3 of them, or either through regulations or through renewal of democracy or through other means. And they are also working on creative ways in which modern democracies can be reimagined or regulated to address the diverse challenges of the age of Anthropocene. Now, with regard to David Van Reybrouck, I discovered him in Warsaw last year, and I was a reborn Arne Næssian, or Næssianist, if you wish, when I listened to him, because he seemed to me to be an extraterrestrial, okay? A man of so many talents, blessed with so many talents that it was too good to be true. After he's dazzled you with his very erudite masterpieces such as Congo, Against Elections, or recently Revolution, the books I recommend very heartily to all of you to read. They're very inspiring. He is also the co-author, as Svein mentioned, of many civic initiatives that are, as he says, to recover joy in politics. To recover joy in politics. Who would ever think of this idea, you know? Can politics be happy at all? David thinks it can. He is a great advocate and practitioner of participatory democracies where citizens are co-governance of the commons. So the co-governance is very important here. And he is a living proof that even in Belgium, a country which we associated with gourmet chocolate and chronic governmental breakdown, we find gourmet ideas and daring social political innovations led by writers and activists such as David. Last but not least, David is also a poet, and that we have to emphasize, because poets, as Salman Rushdie has said, are people who name the unnameable, point at frauds, start arguments, make the world into a kinder place, and stop us going to sleep. So now, David, now is your chance to wake us up.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. So I understand I have the heavy burden to show that joy can be refound in politics, to raise the bar of expectations even a little bit higher. Thank you, Nina, for these wonderful words and the fantastic invitation. It's a real honor to be here. Thank you for the magnificent music as well. It's an honor to speak to you tonight from this place where so many brilliant minds have spoken to you before, and to do so in the spirit of Arne Næss, who practiced a philosophy that was free, rational, critical, and at the same time joyful, curious, creative, a wonderful combination. A thinker that showed us how to be fiercely independent and at the same time deeply concerned about what is going on in the world. A philosopher whose investigations combined abstract thinking with an ongoing dialogue with the present. So it is truly an honor for me to be here, and it's truly an honor as well just to have met Svein, Arne's wife. Thank you for being here. And in this spirit of combining philosophical thinking with societal challenges, I would like to take a bit of a risk tonight. That is to work on a particular example, a concrete example, a recent example, even an example from Norway. The risk is that I am not Norwegian and not even an expert on Norwegian politics, but I think that the case study is so revealing of what is going on and what is at stake in today's democracies that it really does exemplify some of the challenges of our time. So here we go. On Tuesday, 9th of January this year, 2024, the Norwegian Parliament voted a decision that allows to open an area of Norway's continental shelf for commercial deep-sea mining. I'm sure all of you have heard about it. It was all over the news, both nationally and internationally. Norway was the first country to do so in the world. And this was not for immediate exploitation, but for initial exploration. So it's a first step. And from now on, commercial companies can apply for licenses with the Norwegian government to map and to explore deep-sea minerals. Because at a depth of several kilometers, they have been found in two different forms, in sulfide deposits that contain cobalt, copper, and zinc, and in manganese crust that contain rare earth minerals that we use for our handies or cellular telephones, electric cars, and wind turbines. So essential components are to be found at the ocean floor. And the zone that was opened up for exploration is a region between Svalbard, Iceland, and Greenland, of the size of 281,000 square kilometers. If that is too abstract, it's bigger than the United Kingdom, about the size of Italy. And prospective research has made estimates that 3 million tons of cobalt are to be found there, 38 million tons of copper, and 45 million tons of zinc, with an estimated worth of 92 billion US dollars. The decision in January met with great criticism, both nationally and internationally. Nationally, negative feedback came from a number of players, including Norwegian fisheries. Internationally, there was protest from the UK, from the European Commission, from the European Parliament. People referred to Canada, who has a moratorium, a ban on deep-sea mining. And so when Norway opened the gates, there was international protest. Also from major international NGOs like Greenpeace, WWF, and on the online platform Avaz, more than 600,000 people signed a petition against the decision. Other protests came in the form of, we're at the university, scientists. The decision was taken politically against the advice of the Norwegian Environmental Agency, against the protest of the high-level panel for sustainable ocean economy, against the view of the editorial board of Nature, the most prestigious academic publication in the world, against the advice of scientists who wanted to take Norway away as a co-chair of the aforementioned high-level panel for sustainable energy, sustainable ocean economy. But on the other hand, the Storting had all right to do so, because that part of the Atlantic Ocean, since a couple of years, belongs to where Norwegian politics can work. Way beyond the 12 nautical miles that belong to the territorial limits of the country, that's 22 kilometers in normal speech, and the 200 nautical miles of the exclusive economic zones, that's 370 kilometers in normal speech. Since 2009, Norway can be economically active on its continental shelf, stretching more than 1,200 kilometers. It can only work on the seabed. The water column above is international. The seabed can be explored by Norway. So this is the situation where we stand now. It was perfectly legitimate for the Norwegian parliament to take that decision. It was taken by an independent, sovereign, national parliament, the Storting. And the government promised in a press release on the day of that vote in January to do this exploration, and I quote now, in a knowledge-based and sustainable manner. And it also promised to have respect for all existing international treaties, such as the UN High Seas Treaty of 2023 and the International Seabed Authority in 1994. Don't be intimidated by these conventions. I didn't know about them until a month ago, but they are important, and the Norwegian government promised to respect them. What's even more, the decision was taken by a very large majority in the Storting, 80 against 20. This is what we call a strong decision. And it was done so on the basis of an ad hoc coalition uniting today's majority, Labour and Centre Party, with the Conservative and the Progress Party who are in the opposition. And that deal was concluded 1 month before the actual vote in December. And the arguments given by those in Parliament included a number of considerations. Explicitly, they said, like, we need these minerals, the world needs these minerals for the green transition, and the demand is increasing enormously. So this is a demand which we can meet with what we have. And secondly, yes, these minerals can be found on land, but that makes us very dependent on countries like Russia and China. And in terms of strategic autonomy, it's important to move away from being dependent on authoritarian regimes. Another argument was given, we also want to be independent from a country like Congo, which I happen to know a little bit, where mining of cobalt, for instance, is typically done in non-industrial, artisanal mines by children working in the most appalling conditions, which is true. I've seen it with my own eyes, and so that argument was invoked as well. These mines in Congo that are controlled not by the state, not by the government, not by companies, but by militias. Implicit arguments were voiced as well, or interpreted, that these new economic activities were good for Norway. As all countries have to transition away from oil and gas, it would allow for a new set of economic activities. And on top of that, Norwegian know-how and expertise in offshore industries could be recycled and reused away from fossil fuels onto minerals. So it was a reuse of existing talent. So the reasoning was, this decision is good for the world, it's good for the West, and it's good for Norway, for Norwegian companies, for Norwegian politics, and for Norwegian society, as it will bring in a lot of money that we can spend on public challenges. So, there was no doubt that the decision, a monumental decision, was taken respecting the rules of today's Norwegian democracy, which counts, and you all know it, as one of the strongest, one of the most stable, and one of the most trusted in the world. Every year, international indexes like the Economist Intelligence Unit or Freedom House show to what extent Norway is in the top 3, top 2, or top number 1 in the world. However, Norwegian democracy is perhaps not totally immune to change either. Just a few weeks ago, the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, published an important report. This is the moment I'm getting thirsty. And the report was entitled Survey on Drivers of Trust in Public Institutions. And it was based on research in 18 OECD countries. The average trust in these 18 countries, across these countries, was 39% of people in these countries trusting their government. Norway had 48%. Fantastic, well above the average. Half of the country, almost half of the country, is trusting the government. Yet, this year, in this report, the OECD scholars noted a remarkable drop of 16% in Norway, from 64 to 48%. And it was the highest drop observed throughout the countries that were at stake. With 48% today, Norway stands at the level of Belgium. But sincerity forces me to admit that we made a 15% jump ahead. So you went down and we went up. This is what brings us together tonight. If we look at political parties, the figure in Norway is high, 36%, but it's well below the trust in government. 36% of people in this country, about a third, trust political parties. It's still among the highest, comparable to countries like Denmark, Switzerland, and the Netherlands. However, there too changes are happening. We see parties having less and less members, and those who are still a member are less active as members. And even in Norway, the number 1 country according to The Economist in terms of democracy, political parties are considered to be the least trustworthy institutions in the country. Now, what does it say about the health of your democracy, my democracy, and virtually every single Western established democracy, if the key players of that democracy are seen to be the least trustworthy of society? What does that say if our key players, political parties, are not trusted? And what does it say about the legitimacy of decisions taken by political parties when their trust is dwindling rapidly? That's the first concern. A second concern is how representative is representative democracy. Norway has today a population of about 5.4 million inhabitants. And with the last elections in September 21, 3.9 of them were entitled to vote and 3 million actually voted. It was a great voter turnout. Now, of this total population, only 6 to 7% is member of a political party. It used to be 16% in 1980. That makes for about 320,000 people who are a member. Of these 320,000, only 108,000 are active members. Militants are getting increasingly less. Of these 108,000, 4,151 were candidates for the Storting elections. And of these 4,169 got elected. 169. 100 of them were present on the day of the vote in January, and 80 voted in favor. And this group of 169 is sociologically not very representative in all respects. Women are slightly underrepresented, 50% in society, 45% in the Storting, still among the highest in the world, but not quite there yet. But people without a college degree are hugely underrepresented. They make 65% of Norwegian society. They only make 20% in the Norwegian parliament. And that's not a coincidence. It's what you see in elected assemblies all over the world. Elections historically were not necessarily a tool for democracy, but a tool for aristocracy. And we've all forgotten that the word elections and the word elite have the same etymological function. So on paper, everybody can run for election in parliament. In practice, it excludes large parts of society, especially the poor and the least educated. To go back to our example of deep-sea mining, one of the most important decisions in recent Norwegian history was thus taken by the least trusted public institutions, political parties, in an assembly that does not resemble society, the parliament, at a time when trust in government is experiencing an unprecedented decline in public trust, the sharpest drop it has ever witnessed. It's a perfectly legitimate decision according to the rules. But is it still in a dramatically changing environment, in a new context, in today's reality? So we go back to the OECD report, Survey on Drivers of Trust in Public Institutions, and the researchers there try to find out, like, what is determining whether people are trusting or distrusting public institutions. Now, throughout the world, it was quite obvious. The young, the poor, women, and those who are least educated trust less. Why? These are the groups that are underrepresented in the public institutions today. And they found out that the most dominant driver of distrust was people's impression that their voice did not matter. And I have to quote a crucial line from the OECD. The largest trust gaps are associated with the individual sense of having a say in government actions, which is a key driver of trust. So to put simply, when people feel they have a say, they trust government. When they feel they don't have a say, they distrust it. Dear friends, esteemed guests tonight, we are living in truly historical times, and our countries are facing major political, social, economic, ecological, military challenges. More than ever, we need governance that have to be able to make meaningful, strong decisions that are both efficient and legitimate, that are both strong and trusted, that are both innovative and endorsed. The question is, will we get there with today's procedures? Because today's procedures are old procedures. This is an enormous challenge. Our problems are growing, our trust is crumbling. Too much trust in a society is bad. It makes for blind confidence. Too little trust is bad as well. It makes for lame politics. Where do we find the sweet pot in the middle? Where do we find the sweet spot where we can fix and meet the challenge of today? How on earth are we going to make it? And thankfully, Norway still has such strong institutions. I admire you for that. But how can they be strengthened? Especially now. Now, at this time, at this hour of major challenges and changing trust. How can we help our leaders to lead? How can we help our governments to govern? So what could the Norwegian government do when it comes to deep-sea mining, such deeply controversial issue? And the classical answer would be, let us organize a referendum. You know, the referendum is great. Everybody has a say, total participation. Yes, true. It's an advantage. On the other hand, we're talking about a highly technical matter now. With a referendum, nobody is forced to study the topic. There is no necessary learning, and the question is inevitably very binary, yes or no. With a referendum, you might get one answer, but two societies, a broken country like happened with Brexit in Britain. With a referendum, you very often get a question, you very often get an answer to a question you didn't ask. How do you feel about today's government, for instance? With the referendum, you would be asking Norwegians what they think when they don't have to think about deep sea mining. And that challenge is not happening here for the first time. We can learn from different countries. A country like Ireland was faced with a typically challenging situation concerning abortion, which in Ireland was not just illegal, but even unconstitutional. And political parties said, like, if we are going to decide this, if our parliament is going to vote on this, we are going to feel it in the next elections. This is tricky for us. And the alternative would have been a referendum, but they said, like, if we do a referendum, we might end up with a divided society. And so they did something very innovative and very smart. They created a citizens' assembly where a random sample of Irish people drafted by lot was brought together. 99 people came together for 5 weekends over a period of 5 months to discuss this. They were not just drafted by lot as such. There was a learning process. They learned from experts. There was deliberation. There was facilitation. At the end, they came up with a recommendation to change the constitution, and that recommendation went through a referendum. For the first time in history, a constitution was changed thanks to the input of a citizens' assembly. And so it was an interesting way to involve citizens in an engaging way, everyday citizens, lay politicians. And so citizens' assembly became like the third tool. After elections and after the referendum, you could also work with a citizens' assembly. And these three tools stand for three types of democracy: classical representative democracy, classical direct democracy, and deliberative democracy. And so Ireland has been really the pioneering country. They're doing it on a very regular basis now. And people were drafted by lot. It's a bit of a funny procedure. Why on earth would you organize a lottery? Well, they said, like, we want everybody to have a chance to participate. If with the elections the idea is one man, one vote, sounds a bit sexist, one man, one vote. With lottery, it was one person, one chance to be drafted by lot. And that made for maximum diversity in terms of gender, age, education, and where people were living in Ireland. And by doing so, the Irish actually went back to an old tradition, an Athenian tradition, 25 centuries old. Democratic innovation is also democratic renewal, where you rediscover some of the fundamentals of democracy. And at first, the questions were like, hang on, everybody? Are we going to draft by lot everybody? Are we not going to have incompetent people in the room? It's a good question. And yes, an assembly drafted by lot is politically not as competent as an elected parliament, for sure. But they are politically often more free, because they are no longer constrained by party imperatives, by lobby working, or by electoral imperatives. Another question was like, hang on, if we draft people by lot, is there not a danger we will end up with a room full of extremists? But then they realized, well, it's a statistical representation. We might have 1 or 2 extremists, but then Ireland is more than 99 extremists. And today in Norway, you could ask the question like, well, okay, abortion is a moral choice. Deep sea mining is a technical choice. What the Irish discovered is that abortion is a technical issue as well. And I think what is at stake here makes you realize that this is more than a technical question, but a deeply moral choice as well. I think Norway could take some lessons from Australia as well, where in the state of South Australia a couple of years ago, there was a discussion, how are we going to boost our economy? South Australia is mostly a desert, not a lot of economic assets, But the desert could be used to become the global storage place for nuclear waste. Is this a good idea? Might bring in a lot of money. And politicians said, like, we are not going to decide this. We are going to assemble a citizens' assembly, 350 people coming together for several weekends. And they reasoned, yes, this might be good for the economy, but the long-term consequences are unsure, so we should not do it. South Korea had to face another dilemma. After Fukushima disaster in Japan, they were building a new nuclear power plant. Do we stop at the construction site or do we continue? A citizens' assembly in 2017 with more than 470 participants sat down for several months and at the end decided that they should go on building the nuclear power plant. So this is happening in many countries now. France has just finished last year a citizens' assembly on euthanasia, assisted dying, hot topic in France. Such a diverse topic was discussed in a very serene way, with recommendations that were taken seriously. Germany just finished a citizens' assembly, the German federal parliament, the Bundestag, on food and what should be done about that topic. The OECD, you might start to think I'm an advocate for the OECD. I'm not at all, but they have been doing some important work. And one of the work they've been doing is documenting this wave of deliberative democracy, this wave of citizens' assemblies. More than 700 have been documented now. And most of them happening in recent years. There's a real surge now. And what you see is that these new procedures are not there to do away with the current system of elections, but actually to strengthen the current system. It's not an alternative, it's a complement. It's not to replace what we have, it's to strengthen what we have. And you combine lottery with information, with deliberation that is facilitated in order to come up with recommendations. Now, what do we learn from these 700 and plus examples? First thing, citizens are willing and able. Secondly, when you give them time, space, information, and a mandate, they come up with sensible solutions, and they sidestep even party lines and party cleavances. They're able to weigh evidence, and they are able to make important political, moral choices about shaping the future of their communities. Thirdly, the recommendations they come up with are by and large sensible, coherent, ambitious, long-term, and they get to these recommendations faster than political parties with greater amounts of support. If in Parliament you need to struggle to have 50%, in a citizens' assembly you easily get 80, 85, or 9% of support for particular recommendations. The domain where these formula, these citizens' assemblies have been particularly useful are on climate. CCAs, we call them technically, climate citizens' assemblies. Most Western countries, most Western European countries over the past 4 or 5 years have organized one. There are only 3 countries in Western Europe where this has not happened. It's Portugal, Italy, and Norway. And yet, they are interesting. A young German scholar, Jonas Lage, has published last year an incredible article as part of his PhD, where he was comparing the outcome of these citizens' assemblies in about 12 different European countries with the national energy and climate plans of these countries. So what do citizens say and what do politicians say in these same countries? And time and again he realized that citizens dared to put something on the table that for politicians was unimaginable. They were talking about mitigation and adaptation, emitting less and preventing the worst. But citizens say like, hang on, we need measures on sufficiency. Please regulate it. Governments, politicians were basically saying, well, the demand is increasing, we have to take care of the supply. Whereas citizens were saying, as long as the cookie jar is open, we are going to be eating cookies. Help us to put the lid on the cookie jar. Help us to regulate. Dare to put sufficiency measures on the table. It might not be popular if you look at an opinion poll, but it's sensible if people know about the topic. And so that's been a really interesting awareness. Because in citizens' assemblies, what we see is that passive consumers become active citizens. If you treat people responsibly, they behave responsibly. And angry voters turn into constructive individuals. Joy gets back into the play. And it really reminds me of a part of Arne Næss's thinking when he made a distinction between, and I think it's a really interesting distinction between moral acts and beautiful acts, based on Immanuel Kant. Moral acts is things you have to do because they're moral, even against your inclinations. Beautiful acts are acts you do because you want to do them. Now, imposing climate measures on citizens is like forcing people to do moral acts. They don't like it. But if citizens decide for themselves that they have a say in this, it becomes a beautiful act. So I think citizens' assemblies turn moral actors into beautiful actors. As I just hinted at, Norway has not been at the forefront of this development, probably because the trust here is still so high and you don't need it. That's quite possible. But this high trust societies has stopped other countries like Denmark and Finland from investing massively in citizens' assemblies. Both countries now have public institutions with public money who are running citizens' assemblies. In Denmark, it's the Danish Board of Technology, Danske Teknologirådet, and in Finland it's called Sitra, the Finnish Innovation Fund. And yet things have been happening in Norway, mostly at the local level. Places like Trondheim, Bergen, Stavanger, and also this city, Oslo, have done interesting processes with citizens' assembly. And this is the moment to salute the work of Arild, who is with her tonight, and I'm going to talk with him in a minute, from Democratic Society, from Trondheim, and also the really important work of So Central, a non-profit organization based here in Oslo, who have done incredible work in terms of championing and campaigning for these initial forms of democratic consultation. And thanks to their efforts, Norway will soon know its first National Citizens' Assembly. It's a bottom-up initiative. Interesting. It's civil society saying, like, we should do this. So Central is working together with Norwegian Church Aid, WWF Norway, Caritas, Save the Children Norway, and the Norwegian Children and Youth Council to talk on the topic of the oil fund, the well fund. We have all this beautiful money. We can use it for good in society, but it comes from selling fossil fuels at a time of war. We should talk about this. Really interesting. And I think the invitations will be sent out in just a few days or a few weeks. Luckily, the Norwegian government is also stepping in, because the first top-down citizens' assembly commissioned by the government is being planned by the Ministry of Digitalization and Governance on the topic of sustainable consumption. Really interesting to see that is catching on here as well. And my hope would be that in the near future, a citizens' assembly would be organized on the topic of deep-sea mining. And I hope that 100 people would be drafted by lot for a substantial amount of time. I would be thinking between 6 to 9 months, 6 to 9 weekends working together. And you would have to pay people. This is a big commitment. And you would have to use a 2-step lottery, sending out a first random sample by which you send out thousands of invitations to addressees across the country. You will get hundreds of positive answers. And the danger will be that among the positive answer, it's almost a certainty there's going to be more white men above the age of 50 who are highly educated and who read Aftenbladet. It's exactly those who are overrepresented in the stewarding as well. So what you do is you do a second lottery among those hundreds of people who are willing to come. And this is your stratified sample, first a random sample, then a stratified sample, where you calibrate for age, gender, education, region, and attitude towards climate change. You would have to give them access to information. The first couple of weekends, It's hard work for your participants because they will have to learn about technological needs and developments. They will have to learn about international maritime law, learn about the techniques of deep-sea mining, about the geopolitical context as well, about Norwegian finances, about ecological consequences. Experts will have to come along, academics will have to come along to explain what is at stake there. And in weekend number 3 and 4, I would make room for stakeholders. Experts are neutral, stakeholders have a stake in the game. I would invite people from the offshore sector. The lobbyists you want to hide away, invite them, let them present their case. People from civil society, invite them, let them present their arguments. People from ecological movements, from fisheries, let them have their say. They should be part and parcel. They should be on tap, not on top, but on tap. They can give input. And I think this process, you don't undertake it because you want to slow down or you want to torpedo deep-sea mining. If you know the outcome beforehand, don't do it. Don't do it. It's fake. You do it because you're curious. You do it because you want to get some meaningful input on this controversial topic, and you want to have some meaningful input from, when your challenge is long-term and it has global consequences, you want an answer that is independent from short-term imperatives and local vested interests. But with industrial lobbies, they're always in favor, of course. And ecological campaigners, they're always against, of course. And political parties, they always have to win the next election. So who do you trust? Who do you trust? And I think the mandate, the tasks should not be a simple yes or no question. Here's a first trial at how I would phrase the question, and I'm sure it would need fine-tuning. But I would ask these 100 Norwegians, under which conditions should the Norwegian government allow the commercial exploitation of deep-sea minerals? And at the end, you might get 20 recommendations. You might give them to the government. You might give them to the people of Norway in the form of a referendum or a preferendum where they can highlight what they like and don't like. And it would get for some collective validation. Doing so would strengthen today's government decision. It would refine what the Norwegian demos considers important. And my hope would be, and let us imagine that this would not happen only once, but this would become an annual feature of Norwegian democracy. Let us hope this might even become a permanent feature. I've been personally involved with designing the world's very first examples of permanent citizens' assembly. And the true pioneer is the German-speaking community of Belgium. It's very tiny, but I've been very brave. It's the first place on earth where next to the elected parliament, you have a permanent citizens' council drafted by lot. And they work together and it changes dynamic. The city of Brussels, the city of Paris have been replicating and enhancing that model. My country, Belgium, has become the first country in the world with a bill on sortition, on lottery. The internal regulations of Parliament and Senate have been changed so that citizens' assembly become a possibility. And let us imagine, let us even be more imaginative. Let us hope this is not only a national thing. Let us try and dream of international citizens' assemblies. They're already happening in the European Union. Because, let's face it, the decision that was taken here, opening up the ocean's bed, it's a monumental decision, not just for Norway, but for humanity. This is the last place on Earth that is unspoiled. It's also the least understood part of the planet. We know more about the moon than about the ocean bed. If Norway says yes, it unleashes literally a race to the bottom. Other countries will step in. Bigger zones will be exported. This is a national decision with global consequences. And no country could imagine doing something like this on Antarctica, because Antarctica is an international condominium, but the deep sea is seen as a national matter of affairs. Perhaps we need a global citizens' assembly. The first of this sort took place in 2021 and 2022, when 100 people drafted by lot came together through Zoom, several days, many hours, I really encourage you to go and check the website globalassembly.org to see what illiterate farmers from Yemen could decide with domestic workers in Ivory Coast and people living in the forest of southern Thailand. Absolutely extraordinary. A new global citizens' assembly will take place next year. And voices are raising that the annual COP conference should incorporate in the heart of its considerations a global citizens' assembly. Perhaps deep-sea mining is too big a decision to be left in Norwegian political hands. If it's a big question for traditional politics, let us invite everyday citizens in. And if the topic is too big for one country, let us include the global community for relevant input. No country is a planet. What you do affects us. Dear friends, esteemed guests, Arne Næss, in all his writing, mentioned democracy at quite a number of occasions. And for him, it was clear that democracy was more than just about voting. It was about being active citizens, about including everyone in a spirit of dialogue, respect, pluralism, and tolerance. Deep ecology was to be accompanied by deep democracy, and this is what I've tried to explore with you tonight. Let us deepen democracy. Let us democratize democracy. Let us move from the right to vote, which we have now, and it's so crucial, to the right to speak, the right to voice. It makes for bolder decisions. It makes for better policies. It makes for stronger societies, and it makes for happier citizens that are better informed, more responsible, and happier. It's 2024. This year, Norway is celebrating 210 years of parliamentary democracy and 750 years since the Landslov came into existence. 750 years, wonderful. You are still one of the most stable democracies in the world. I hope you can remain like this for a long time. But democracy is never finished. It's a journey through time. And now we are facing complex decisions with long-term consequences and with planetary implications. And I don't think it would hurt to have a few extra tools in the toolbox here in Norway. Maybe you don't need it right away, but that's also the case with the fire insurance. It's better to get one before the house is burning than after. Meanwhile, let us think of the deep, dark ocean floor where we have never been, yet where we belong, like it belongs to all of us living on this planet, now or later. I thank you so very much.
David, as usual, has done his homework. When I called him about 10 days ago, I asked him, what are you up to? And he says, well, I have 10 days to learn everything about Norway and read all of Arne Næss. And there you are. He comes up. He proves it. So this is really impressive. I must admit this is quite a feat. David, you bet the record, as usual. Now, we are having now a very interesting session because it is a custom at the Arne Næss Symposium to invite slightly older and young researchers to comment and ask questions to the Arne Næss Professor. And the first one in the queue here, in the inquiry queue, is Arild. Ohren, who is the researcher at NTNU, who is a kindred spirit of David's because he's been organizing citizens' publics in several cities. He is also an international researcher, a senior democratic expert on net zero cities, the Democratic Society, and he serves on the advisory board for the Federation of Innovation in Democracy Europe. So here is a very expert guy who is going to challenge or agree with you, David. So I'm all ears. Now, where is Arild? Please, take the floor.
So, do you hear me? Yeah. So thank you so much, David, for the really inspiring speech. Of course, I come from the democratic innovation field, so this is something that is very close to my heart. So it's also very really touching to see this topic now being talked about in a very large stage with the Arne Næss Symposium, something that I've been very, very much part of my life for about 15 years. So I really thank you for this and the opportunity to speak for you here. In Norway, he touched upon it, we have been lagging a little bit behind when it comes to this. And I want to go back to when I first started getting interested in democratic innovations, which was in 2011. And I was in China studying Chinese politics. And I started looking at what kind of cases there were about democratic innovations, because I came up with a very interesting article there. And there I saw that Denmark had done a lot. Finland had done a lot. Nothing in Norway. So why is that, and why haven't we done something? And that triggered my interest to go into this kind of field of democratic innovations. We have done a lot in Norway as well, mostly on a local level. It's been, like David said, we have done in Trondheim, we have done in Oslo, we have done in Stavanger, we have done in Larvik. We have also done a company one that is driven by the company employees that have done random selection there. And that triggered some of my questions here. Because, yes, through my work and through all the organizations I've done, I believe in this tool, and I believe it is a really important tool. And as David says, democracy is never finished. And to quote a very famous from Collins, Patrice Collins, she writes that when we have started to believe so, we have actually killed it. We should never stop searching for those solutions and try to democratize the kind of solution we want to search for, the challenges that we face. And I'm really worried. I'm really, really worried. Through my work, I see a lot of those different cities around in Europe, 112, that design climate contract on how to achieve net zero until 2030. Democracy and participation is a central part of it, because the European Union have said that it is a really central part. When I start looking at them, and you start looking at what they have to do to achieve this goal, it is incredible. And the demand you place on citizens is really, really high. I am fearing that we are not working hard enough to coming up with the solutions that David has said here. We need experimentation, we need it fast, and we need to experiment not only with democratic innovation with citizens' assemblies, but we also need it through the form of what about companies? The big elephant in the room here is that, yes, we can have democratic innovations, we can have governments, we can have cities, include citizens, but when you ask the cities around in Europe, what is their biggest challenges? It is, we have a very restricted amount of maneuvering here. We have big companies, stakeholders, that have a big impact on our goal to achieve zero emission. They are not democratic. A lot of the decisions are taken in an undemocratic way. What about those? Shouldn't we stop, or we should continue with the government? But one of the things that I've seen in the democratic innovation field is that we have a blind spot. We have not talked about companies and how we can include employees and workers on how they want to make the decision. We had one of the first one in Norway, which was a company that had a citizens' assembly to try to involve the workers on designing the sustainability strategy. We need more of that. We need that. However, I also want to challenge David on one thing that has been troubling for me. And that is, I see now these citizens' assemblies are being used as a tool for big corporations to try to go around the transparency and accountability mechanism that you usually have in other democracies. Facebook is designing citizens' assemblies on privacy laws, for example. I don't think Facebook want to do that because they are really interested to hear what the citizens are saying. I think they do it because they don't want to have privacy laws in now. They want to use it as a tool to say to people, look, we have done this. We have included people in the process. Let's not go into this. And we have a lot of criticisms of those processes. Another thing I also want to challenge on is the big challenge. It is the big challenge in deliberative democracy. The reason why we did deliberative mini-publics, the reason why we started with sortition and refound sortition from the ancient Athens, was that you cannot have the entire country deliberate. You needed a way to select people. What you get is 100 people, depending on the size of the assembly, of course, that goes through a deliberative process. They hear expertise. They often change their opinion drastically and come up with solutions. Would the rest of the people consider that legitimate? This is expertise informed, and I want to challenge that with David to imagine, okay, how can we scale this up to get them to be deliberation for everyone, not just the 100 that is in the Citizens' Assembly. And you touched upon a little bit with the referendum in Ireland, but I also see that when you start using this on polarized issues, they get into the same problems that other institutions have, that you think they are expert-led and information-driven, and people don't trust them. Maybe. That is just an observation from Copenhagen, which they did on the Iceland, tried to build new Iceland outside of Copenhagen, and they distrusted the entire process. That is my two main challenges to David that I wanted to ask him. It is challenges that I sit in. I don't have the answer to it. But I really believe that as Norway, we really need to experiment more. Because, yes, we have a decline of trust, but we are in this luxury position that we have enough trust now to really experiment. And as David says, we need more tools in the toolbox to be able to handle different kind of challenges. Thank you.
Very much, Arild. These were very thoughtful challenges and something for David to chew on. He decided that he would like to collect all the challenges and all the questions from the panelists, so I'd like to invite Joly, who is our next distinguished panelist here. I don't need to introduce her to anybody, I think, but she's recently co-authored a book on trust with me, and she started from Nina. Let's go after these bastards from Equinor. There you are. This is typical.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is a tremendous topic. I've been thinking about democracy for maybe some 20 years, and I have observed how, for instance, money have destroyed democracy and has made it, il a creusé, il a enlevé la substance, taken away the real substance of democracy. When you think about, for instance, the American election campaign, it costs today, or it costed for last elections, about $10 billion. Who are paying for this? It's not people, it's not normal people. That's the banks, the pharmaceutical industry, and they want something back. This means that the elected president is not free to, for instance, take measures against the global warming. This is very fundamental. Very many countries haven't regulated the financing of political parties. Norway don't have a regulation. Anybody can give money to the political parties. The only requirement here is that it should be transparent. But this is not sufficient. This is something we have to look after. And then we see that the money from the multinationals, they are not participating in the life of the countries. They are not paying taxes, and neither do the rich individuals. So here we have a lot of inequality. And I have observed here in Norway that very many decisions are being taken without really going through a democratic process. As Nina told you, we have written a book about the Norwegian confidence in their institutions, and we are showing that this confidence is really perverting democracy. We are giving examples. For instance, we see that Equinor, the big Norwegian oil company owned by the state at 67%, they made a loss in the US of $25 billion, and nothing happened. The government said, we trust this company to clean it up. And this is hiding laziness, weakness, and showing that the real power is not where we believe. It's not in the government, it is in the company. And this is not democratic. And these kind of examples, they are numerous. So I think we need to strengthen our democracy, and the way that David is showing us is really one way that could improve things. And it has the advantage of being easy to put in place. We could have popular assemblies together with the parliament, deliberating on important issues. It is really shocking that the public opinion was not really scared about the decision to open up for mining in the deep sea. There has not been a lot of discussion in Norway, not a lot of newspaper articles. And even when people came from all over the world to make demonstrations in front of the Storting, our newspapers didn't really talk about it. So these are important lacks, and we see that the decision taken by 80 persons in our Storting, out of which a lot do not really care about the future of our climate, for instance, like our Center Party. I think that is really criminal. Excuse me. So I think it is urgent to reinforce our democracy. We have this tremendous trust that is not always funded, because we are in love with trust. It is Norwegian to trust our government. And we had good reasons for that some decades ago, when this country was built up after the war. We built really a good society, but this has changed. And I find it is extraordinary when you see that our Minister of Environment going to Dubai, coming back, saying that we will now move away from fossil energy, but this don't change the Norwegian oil and gas policy. You know, we are not like other people. Our oil is not like other oil. You have bad companies like BP, Total, Exxon. Their oil is dirty, but our oil is a good thing for the climate. This was written days before the last parliamentary election here in Norway by an oil lobbyist called Rystad. He really says that Norwegian oil is good for the environment. And a few days ago, our Sockel department, as they call it now, that is a new name for the oil department, they made a program, or they made scenario, 3 scenarios, saying that if we are searching for oil and gas and we will have we will have chance and the price will be high, we can earn even a new oil fund, even bigger. They talked about some 18 trillion Quran, and that was the maximum, and 3 trillion was the lower. And then they added, and this is really Norwegian, this is conform with the Paris Agreement, with what the World Energy Department asks, and the UN. This is really making, what shall I say, hiding for people what we are doing. The words, they are pretending that we are working for a better future, but we will earn this money, and I don't see how terrible it is that we know that the International Energy Bureau has recommended that all the oil and gas that we already know about, some 60% of it should stay in the earth, because if we are burning everything that is already in the accounting of the fossil companies, the temperature will increase with 6 degrees, and we cannot live anymore. So we don't need new drills and new resources. But this is being hidden for people. And you know what? Due to 2 investigations, one from the OECD and one from a private company, Norway has the highest rate of climate-skeptical people in the world. And this is because they have been told stories forever and for very long. So I really believe that what we see here is that this is not at all democratic, and that the companies have the power and they are imposing their views, and they will work now for better conditions so that they can continue to search for oil longer and longer north without seeing that they are increasing the tension in the world, because if we are going for oil north, the other countries will also do it, and that will create more tension that we don't need. So to me, having ordinary people that don't want to be re-elected and that are not caring about their career to make sensitive decisions for themselves and their grandchildren would be a guarantee, a little guarantee, to stop maybe this race towards a temperature that we cannot live with. So I think that the trust that too many Norwegians put in the institutions has to be moderated. We need more critical attitudes. We need more informed public. And I think that David's solutions would help us getting there. Thank you.
Right, so you have two challenges now, David, and the latest one was about the big money, big corporations, and so your idea of citizens' assemblies a remedy for the power, and how can it handle actually the power of big corporations, internationals, and big money of the ever so greedy companies? Now, the last challengers are two students from the Center for Development and the Environment. The first one is Joly Clausen, originally from Germany. Please. Yes, you're approaching the table. She has a background in sociology and philosophy, and her master thesis is about Buddhist impact on human notions of happiness, well-being, and their relations to nature. So this is an interesting combination here, but David, stay assured, these two people, these two young researchers, read all your books from cover to cover. So this is quite a feat. Now, the other challenger is Marcus L. Johansen, who is American-Norwegian, who is a philosopher, who is currently writing his master thesis on the environmental justice in Minnesota. So I would like to both challengers approach the table and challenge our star.
All right, then I will start. First and foremost, I would like to thank Nina for this amazing opportunity through which I have been able to learn a lot. I would also extend my thanks to David for his remarkable work in advancing the concept of democracy. His idea of bringing people together in deliberative democracy has truly been commendable, and it has been quite difficult to challenge such innovative ideas. However, in our already polarized and deeply divided world, I advertise that we must tread carefully. We need to be acutely aware of the challenges our society is facing at the moment. While this idea of citizens' assembly might work well in smaller, less divided settings, implementing it in larger, more complex societies might be significantly more challenging. Citizens' assemblies are crucial, or citizens' mobilizations are undoubtedly crucial, but we must recognize that not all mobilizations are inherently positive. There are those instances that try to undermine democracy itself. To illustrate my point, I would like to draw your attention to an incident that happened in Germany a couple of months ago that was recorded on video and published online. It might not resonate with everyone here, but for me as a German, it carries a significant meaning. The video shows wealthy German youth chanting Nazi slogans against foreigners. They sing something like "Foreigners out and Germany to the Germans." And all of that on the melody of a current pop song. Watching this video fills me with a deep sense of fear. It sends a shiver down my spine. It makes me very emotional, and it serves as a strong reminder of the alarming and threatening development that is occurring in many countries today. In Germany, this development is outlined by the rise of the Alternative für Deutschland, the AfD. While this party, the AfD, has been around for quite some time, they have gained considerable traction recently. The latest EU elections, which were the first ones to allow 16 and 17-year-olds to participate, the AfD gained the second place, in some regions even the first place in Germany. This rise is particularly concerning when we consider the interconnectedness of climate change, climate-related disasters, and the potential future waves of climate refugees. Given the current trajectory of climate change, we are likely to face a major refugee crisis in the coming years. This issue demands greater awareness, and because we are already so polarized on this topic. And it is an issue where democratic innovation ended up being counterproductive. That does not mean that it was a bad idea. It just means that we need to tread more carefully in implementations like these. This development is especially alarming because it came on the heels of one of the biggest scandals the AfD has faced so far. Earlier this year, a secret meeting has been exposed, revealing discussions of AfD politicians and PD members and other right-wing sympathizers about a so-called master plan for immigration. This master plan includes the deportation of both legal and illegal immigrants, as well as their children. And this was well before the big win of the AfD at the EU elections. It fills me with deep concern, especially when we consider the Germany's unique historical background, which has led to a heightened awareness towards the dangers of fascism. And yet, despite this awareness, we are still grappling with these issues. Unfortunately, Germany is not alone in this struggle. Similar right-wing movements are on the rise worldwide, threatening democracy, equality, and freedom. Populist right-wing movements often follow a similar trajectory across different nations. I look with concern to the United States, where their trajectory on equality and women's rights. Moreover, in countries with a strong political culture of lobbyism, how can we truly empower the people when there's the risk of the same corrupting influence that is affecting our politicians? With more power comes more vested interests, making impartiality harder to maintain, especially in those countries where politicians already inherit great power. Paul Mason, who extensively studied fascist processes, described the phase we are currently in as a cultural war on multiple fronts. This war only serves to deepen polarization, distrust, and hatred on all sides. We are witnessing a growing animosity towards movements that try to advance freedom and equality, principles that are the foundation of our democracy. Additionally, climate movements that try to address the urgent and existential threat of climate change are increasingly met with hatred and criminalization. This widespread hostility not only fractures our society, but undermines our collective efforts to tackle critical challenges. During my internship at the Council of Europe, it was widely understood that climate change is considered political suicide. It is no longer a topic that can win elections. This is where I strongly agree with David. We need to reevaluate our political system and its boundaries. However, I want to advertise that we are in the midst of a polycrisis, and we need to recognize the interconnectedness of social, climate, and developmental issues. We need to be aware of possible outcomes like a refugee crisis. And we need to be cautious of the political landscape before we invite people to a place of power and political influence. Citizens' assemblies might indeed be a part of the solution, and I truly hope so, but we need to take a broader and deeper approach. For this, I advocate for a multidisciplinary manner to learn to listen to the unheard voices in our society. As we review these challenging times, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by the scale of the problems we are facing today. But in the face of these daunting issues, we must recognize that hope is a powerful force. Hope drives us to seek solutions, to believe in a better future, and to work tirelessly towards it. It helps the people in Germany to stand up against fascism and against the government, including the AfD, each month. But hope alone is not enough. We also need to cultivate empathy. Empathy for those voices who have been marginalized, for those who suffer in silence, and for the future generations that will inherit our earth. Empathy will help us to bridge divides, to find common ground, and to create a world where democracy, equality, and freedom can truly flourish. So let us not be paralyzed by the threat of movements like the AfD, but rather be inspired by ideas and initiatives like those David puts forth, and by what we can achieve together. With hope and empathy as our guide, I think we can overcome these challenges and build a better tomorrow. Thank you.
I want to say thank you to you, Joly, and to Nina, and everybody who has spoken. I don't have much to comment on the case of deep-sea mining, other than the fact that it is a grim example of greenwashing and shouldn't be seen separately from our government's refusal to phase out fossil fuel production. But I am, of course, here to... Yeah, thank you. But of course, I am here to challenge our Arne Næss chair, David, yet this has been quite difficult since I find many of his ideas exciting. David's proposal for a comprehensive democratization of climate politics highlights not only the importance, but also the inherent legitimacy of citizen-led change. Letting people orchestrate climate action through informed, deliberative processes is a long overdue response to our system's reliance on partisan politics, corporate profit, and short-term thinking. So ultimately, at the core of his idea is a revolutionary sentiment: political power can and should be redistributed to everyday people. So I guess I want to make clear that I do think democratic innovations such as citizens' assemblies have the potential to disrupt and transform the status quo of climate politics. And I'm thinking especially of the sort of technocratic policy culture we have, which dictates what is considered reasonable public discourse on climate solutions, but also social change in general. But despite the appeal of these assemblies, we also have to reckon with the fact that addressing the climate crisis through mutual dialogue or deliberation requires a diagnosis or some sort of collective understanding which truly attends to its moral and socio-historical dimensions. It is only then that we can commit to solutions that are socially just, ecologically sound, and highly efficient. This is an extremely tall order, as many of you are well aware of, but luckily for us, the task of diagnosing or framing the climate crisis is something David does in his work. He, like many other scholars today, frames the climate crisis as a continuation of deeply colonial dynamics, highlighting how we in the global north continue to appropriate and degrade more than our fair share of the atmosphere, in large part due to our systems of unfettered resource extraction and material overconsumption. And in doing so, as many of you are also aware of, we are externalizing the greatest social costs of climate change onto those who are least responsible. And to quote some of David's previous work, we are essentially colonizing the future of the global south in a manner similar to the historical theft of its territories. But of course, even if we in this room can recognize some of the structural causes of the climate crisis, there will always be, or is currently a sort of dissonance or a disconnect between this diagnosis and a tendency towards reformism coming out of citizens' assemblies. These assemblies are often, except for the ones that are institutionalized on a permanent basis, they are often, although not always, a supplementary tool within larger political machines focused on predefined questions and without any formal commitment structures. This begs two questions, in my opinion. Are citizens' assemblies capable of framing the climate crisis as a failure of our current social system? And if they do, would they be taken seriously by governments in power? I want to mention two examples which I feel illustrate my concerns, and these are from of the more experimental climate assemblies in recent years. In 2020, the UK planned and completed a climate assembly consisting of around 100 members. Out of the many proposals submitted, a significant portion of them were highly individualistic, such as the promotion of plant-based diets or the enhancement of carbon capture technologies. Some of the more progressive proposals, such as the retrofitting of homes or the expansion of renewable energy infrastructure, were selectively adopted or diluted or completely ignored, sidelining critical action that would in fact disrupt economic norms, such as the immediate phasing out and divestment from fossil fuels. France in 2019 was similar in this regard. Following the Yellow Vest movement, President Macron organized a national climate assembly in the spirit of social justice. This assembly is now well known for producing a record amount of very ambitious proposals, which I think many of us would want to support, such as the criminalization of ecocide and the constitutional protection of nature. However, only a fraction of these proposals were accepted by government, and a majority of them were again diluted significantly or ignored completely. I think these examples, they represent a current discrepancy between citizens' recommendations and government action, highlighting the inherent limitations of a non-binding assembly model and the constraints imposed by existing power structures. In other words, the revolutionary or transformative potential of citizens' assemblies risks being co-opted by the same political inertia that has prevented meaningful climate action so far. So considering these examples, while I do think democratic deepening, and perhaps in the form of citizens' assemblies, is an essential part of broader social change, an unreflexive celebration of the sort of current dominant assembly model risks hiding the fact that decolonizing the climate crisis requires a radical material shift. We can never let out of sight that it is our overdeveloped carbon economies in the global north that continue to profit off of a system of capital accumulation and a deeply unequal exchange with the global south. And this is all kept afloat by dominant discourses of human rights, sustainable growth, and technological optimism. So if we truly want to decolonize the climate crisis via deliberation, we need to focus on how we produce knowledge and how we value it, and how this is actually helping us in spearheading a project of social transformation. So whether we are designing or participating in or witnessing an assembly, maybe perhaps this upcoming one in Norway, which we've heard about today, we need to be asking a few critical questions. Who are the ones setting the agenda? Who is given time to speak and who is being listened to? How are climate vulnerable and working class communities, both in Norway and abroad, not only being represented numerally, but also being empowered to influence policy choices? And perhaps on a bit more abstract philosophical level, how is the boundary between politics and the economy being redrawn so that the former may actually govern the latter? So at the end of the day, I want to stress that I realize democratic innovations, such as these assemblies, are a truly worthwhile attempt at breathing new life into our democracies and perhaps pulling the brakes on our climate crisis. This is not some fix-all, fault-free solution. It is very experimental, but it is definitely a step towards building a critical mass that might eventually change the status quo. But time is definitely not on our sides. Thank you.
Timothy, you have a lot on your plate. Will you do the impossible and manage to address all the challenges in 10 minutes?
To be honest, this was the part I was most looking forward to. I knew already what I was thinking. I wanted to hear what other people were thinking. So thank you so much for this incredible input and really smart questions from all generations that have taken the floor. It's hard to answer this enormous variety of questions. I was told we had until midnight, but apparently something has changed in the program. We could conceive of societies as a triangle with 3 points. You have governments, you have citizens, and you have markets. And I would try to cluster the questions within this scheme. In a fair society, this triangle should be symmetrical. What we've seen since the late 80s, 90s is that power is no longer in an equilibrium, but markets have run away with the power. So this is going back to the questions that were asked by Arild about companies and the questions that Marcus raised about economic power. So this is one thing. There's a triangle which is a very skewed triangle now. The other questions were interesting, especially comparing Eva to what Joly said. Eva was saying that in Norway there's too much trust. How do you handle that? Whereas Joly is saying in Germany there's too little trust. So this is on the connection between governments and citizens. So I try to answer some of these questions. I'm just trying to synthesize. I had no idea beforehand what was going to be asked. So I'm trying to structure the chaos that is going on in my head right now, and then I invite you in some of the reflections. When it comes to companies, the question that was raised by Arild, it's true, companies start experimenting with citizens' assemblies. I would like to make a distinction between companies who do this with their staff and companies who do this with their customers. Very different way of working. Both can be relevant. With staff, it can be really great to democratize the work floor. There's a lot of work being done there. When it's with customers, you mentioned the Facebook example, it's not necessarily bad. But, as you say, abuse is just looming around the corner. Just a week ago, I had for the first time in my life a meeting with the CEO of a Belgian bank. It's not the sort of people I see on a regular basis. This is the national bank, which is government-owned, or the government has a majority share. And there was a real understanding that, well, people hate bankers. We want to be there at the service of people. We are missing things. Despite all the context we have with our customers, despite what we see in opinion polls, we want to have a better understanding. And so for me, it's felt like a fairly sincere, this is a new CEO, let's see how long it takes before he gets cynical, but this felt like a genuine engagement to learn more about customers. And he even asked me the question, do you think we should invite non-customers as well? So everyday citizens who put their money in a different bank, a commercial bank. I thought that was interesting. Now, to respond to some of the comments given by Marcus, not all CEOs today are like this young, promising Belgian banker whose future remains uncertain. You are quite right, Marcus. We are here talking about democratizing politics, but how about democratizing economics? And to tie in with what Joly said is, we are losing people right now. We are losing people. Democracy is losing people at an alarming speed. And you referred to situations happening in Germany. Unfortunately, it's not only in Germany. Research shows that we are losing people. Trust is diminishing to the extent that people feel excluded and to the extent that inequality is rising. It would be pointless to democratize politics while not addressing the bigger economic challenge of today, and growing inequality is one of them. In Norway, things might still be quite good. In Belgium, things are reasonably good. But in other countries, the whole democratic promise of equality is not there anymore economically. The inequality is rising at an alarming rate, creating a sense of frustration. If those people who feel impoverished, who are impoverished. It's not just a feeling. Purchasing power has augmented dramatically for the top 10% in society, but the last 40 years has remained stable or has diminished for the middle classes and the working classes. And if these people have the impression we are getting poorer and climate change is going to fall on our shoulders, whereas the richest are the ones most responsible, it makes it quite completely understandable that people are losing faith in democracies. It makes it quite understandable where people are longing for stronger regimes, where not the endless haggling which is happening in a democratic parliament. It makes it understandable that autocratic regimes start having appeal. Authoritarian regimes are getting traction. Fascism is back there. However, we wouldn't make a big mistake if we believe that all those who vote for a populist party today are fascists. They are not fascist yet. We've lost some people. I'm not sure whether we are going to win them back. And they are making a lot of noise on social media. But most of these voters have not become fascist yet. Let's make a distinction between populist parties and populist voters. They will become fascist if we treat them as such. They will become fascist if they continue to be excluded from a meaningful say in society. Would a poor, working class, white, post-proletarian American with short training and short educational attainments, would he storm the Capitol if his opinion would have been asked in a meaningful way throughout different moments in his life? Is a citizen who is treated as a citizen and who has a chance to speak out, thus he or she is going to ruin the furniture of the very institutions that make up your democracy? You only kill your democracy when you don't experience it as democracy anymore. So how can we re-enchant the experience of living in a democracy? And I fully agree, I've been making a plea for citizens' assemblies, but they're not the only tool. There are many things we need to do. Political parties have a job to do. They need to re-engage citizens. They have to make sure more people become members of political parties. Absolutely crucial. Yet citizens' assemblies are, I think, a promising tool as it changes how citizens are treated. I also believe if citizens' assemblies are given real power, and I'm now coming back to you, Marcus, if they are given real power, they are going to change the economic dynamics. One of the reasons why they are not getting real power is because people are afraid of giving away some of that political and economic power. And so, two ways to step up their impact is first, make it permanent. You raised the question, who is asking the question? Who is framing the question? There's so much political power in asking the question. And that's the reason why I'm a strong advocate for permanent citizen councils, because there it's the citizens themselves who are asking the questions. In the German-speaking part of Belgium, the first time a question was put on the table, this was 5 months before the COVID pandemic. Question number 1, put on the table by everyday German-speaking Belgians, what can we do to improve the quality of life in homes for the elderly, for both staff and patients? Wow, that was not on the political agenda. But because everyday citizens were there, they put it on the agenda. And luckily they did so. So absolutely, citizens should be able to raise the questions, and they should be able to engage with citizens afterwards. In the German-speaking part of Belgium, politicians have to react. They have to meet the citizens at the end of the process, 3 months later, 1 year later. They have to say what they have done with the recommendations, and if they took a different course of actions, they have to motivate it in writing why they changed the perspective. So that is making the impact of these citizens' assemblies bigger. Another way of strengthening them is, if it's only a one-time thing, don't just give your report to the president or the king or the prime minister. Thank you, very interesting, really interesting. I really appreciate your work, and it's being put away. Very often this is what happens. And that's why in recent years I've been developing the idea, I've just only mentioned very briefly in my talk, of the referendum that becomes a preferendum. So in Ireland, interesting combination, the Political parties in government, in power, ask for a citizens' assembly on abortion, and that goes through a referendum. Good, nice. The constitution is changed. But the referendum still has the disadvantage of being a yes or a no question. A preferendum would be, here are 20 recommendations. How does the Irish public feel about each of these recommendations? Do they agree totally or totally? And that would give a collective validation to what the Citizen Assembly has done, making it much harder for politicians to do away with what has been raised there. You know, in times of massive economic injustices, it's strange to talk about democratic procedure. And I agree. There's climate change, and I talk about democratic innovation. There's social and economic inequality, I talk about democratic innovation. It feels like it's like a strange field. It's a bit of a hobby where I seem to amuse myself. But it's more than a hobby. I truly believe with John Rawls that there is such a thing as procedural justice. If you make the procedures fair, your outcome will be fairer as well. And so, yes, the detour of democratic innovation is needed to make for socially and economically more just societies. The detour of a citizens' assembly is needed to get more strong action on climate change. With the question on the preferendum, I hope I have one of the questions on the out-group. I know Arild is a very big one. It's a transformative experience for 100 citizens, but there are more than 100 people in Norway. Make them participate in a way that is meaningful, and the preferendum is one tool amongst other ones. I'm just checking my note. I'm 11 minutes now, so I have to cut up. Oh yeah, really, just to come back to something that Eva said at the end. Yes, you have the cleanest oil in production, but if you burn it, it doesn't matter. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Robin Eckersley from the University of Melbourne. I had the great fortune of being the Arne Næss Chair in the winter of 2010-2011. Nina, unfortunately for you, it was a pretty wretched time because you were recovering from a nasty accident, but it enabled me to see firsthand what an indomitable spirit you are. You're absolutely larger than life. You're creative, you're, as I said, indomitable, very sharp, a laser-like wit, indefatigable, and above all, very droll. I mean, who else could have written a book on the cultural history of Norway and called it The Regime of Goodness? Nina, we're here to celebrate you being the maestro of the Arne Næss series and much, much more. We're here to celebrate your tremendous zest for life and your zest for creativity. Good on you, Nina.
Hello, Nina. Larry Buell here, wishing you the happiest of all possible retirements. With very fond memories of my sojourn in Oslo 12 years ago under your care. All the best to you and Atlee. Take care.
It's a great pleasure to send all good wishes to Nina on the occasion of this very special Arne Næss Symposium. Her leadership, her energy, her joy, her humor, to say nothing of her publications and convening powers, has been inspiring to me and to so many others over many, many years. I so enjoyed the time that John Grimm, my husband, and I spent in Oslo with her and with her colleagues, and we wish you well going forward. Best wishes, many thanks, and much love.
Hi, Nina. This is Ramachandra Guha, Ram to you and others, and I'm here to wish you all the very best and many more years of scholarship, conversation, humor, fun, and all the enchantment that you've provided everyone who's known you. We haven't met for many years, but I have the most warm and affectionate memories of the time I spent in 2008 at SUM. But I remember you as if at your sparkle, your wit, your zest, and your enthusiasm, and your sheer brilliance as if it was yesterday. All the best for the years ahead, and hopefully you'll visit India one day and we can meet again.
Hello, Nina. This is your sunny boy, David Sloan Wilson, wishing you the very best for your retirement. I know that you're going to be just as active as ever, and I look forward to the next time when we can share food and great company at that wonderful apartment of yours. So I love you and wish you the very, very best.
This is your last Arne Næss Symposium, and I want to say a few words to you. You are an angel, not in disguise, angelic on the inside as well as on the outside. Everyone can see that. Nina, you are the closest I can get to a pathetic, a searching, open-minded scholar who devotes herself to the longing for truth, beauty, and the good. You share that with Arne Næss, and it was through Arne Næss we found each other. It's almost 20 years ago since I saw you for the first time, and 50 years ago since I was the first chairman of the Arne Næss Chair for Global Justice and the Environment, and later a board member. As part of the rectorate at the University of Oslo for 8 years, SUM was my area of responsibility, and I snuck in as much formal and informal support for the legacy of Arne Næss and deep ecology as I could. But it is you, Nina, who has been the godmother of the Arne Næss program, the seminars, the master students, and the honorary professors. And the success of it all is due to your all-encompassing engagement. From the start in 2007 until today, your life energy and transcending curiosity, and not least what I experience as a personal warmth that makes us circulating around you feel less alone. Så kjære Nina, on behalf of the University of Oslo, the Center for Development and the Environment, you have in the most eloquent, unmistakably Ninask way kept the legacy, the intellectual and spiritual heritage of Arne Næss alive, and we thank you for that. Næss retired as professor in 1970, age 58, due to environmental commitment and the development of environmental eco-philosophy. And he was a strong supporter of the emergence of green politics in Europe. Your retirement will, I'm sure, lead to another but not less influential green politics in Europe. In combination with a growing commitment to environmental issues, it became decisive for Næss to find a theoretical point of view that could unite openness and anti-dogmatism with a sense of affiliation, trust, and defense of eco-philosophical norms. And the establishment of SUM in 1990 was the natural academic home for Arne Næss. Arne once said, "Yourself as a human being is much deeper than you think. The further you get in self-realization, the more necessary it becomes to support others' self-realization in order to move forward in your own." The Arne Næss chairs, as we've heard, have expanded our restricted human imagination, but also the seminars with the Arne Næss students, the Young Researchers Challenge, was born out of your blossoming and fertile idea, Nina. Nina, even if we have traveled quite far together in sponsor-seeking sisterhood, you, as I must say, also have a special theft for funding, even though you are more hesitant to university bureaucracy. Let me end by saying that, Nina, for me, you are one of the greatest sources of inspiration for how beautiful, moral, and provocative actions can be united and descend into a higher unity. Please, everybody, join me in an applause for Nina.